Welcome to another Catholic Family News special report. I'm Brian McCall, the editor-in-chief of Catholic Family News, and I'm happy to welcome back to our program Stephen Kokx, contributor to Catholic Family News and LifeSite News, and we're happy to have you come back and visit with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me back and being on the podcast again.
Great. Well, today our topic is to give a report on an event that happened recently in Orlando, Florida, the CPAC conference, CPAC 2021, sponsored by the American Conservative Union, which was entitled America Uncanceled. And it was a weekend event when the last weekend in February. And we're really happy because Stephen was able to be there on the ground, observe the conference, and agreed to spend some time with us sharing his impressions, what he saw there. So maybe if we can begin, because I know some of our viewers may have watched parts of it and seen the live stream, but maybe could you tell us what it was like to actually be there, because you obviously don't see the kind of what people are like, the interactions in the rooms, you just hear the speeches. So what kind of impression did you get from people? Maybe there wasn't one impression, but was there kind of an overall feeling to the way people were looking at politics in America today? Was it a sense of despair over what's happened the past few months? Hopefulness, mixed? How would you characterize it?
Yeah, so I mean, this is Trump reasserting his dominance over the party. He had not been originally announced to be at CPAC itself. Just I think a week and a half before the event actually was held, they said he was going to give the keynote speech on Sunday, and people were riled up for that. The straw poll that they took at the end of the conference, 55% of the people who were there said that they would support President Trump. I think he's going to be renominated. I think 22% said Ron DeSantis. So the party's mostly still in Trump's pocket. Most people there were excited that he was coming. I do think there were some people who wanted to move on. DeSantis in Florida seems to be sort of the alternative to Trump. He's a bit more polished. He understands the nuances of legislation and how to work certain angles with that a bit better than Trump, I think. I think that reflected in the straw poll. A lot of people on the ground, though, it's interesting when you go to these things, Brian. There's a lot of young people, a lot of college students who, in my estimation, seem to just want to be like the next Tommy Lahren, and just climb the ladder of political commentary and be on Fox News. And unfortunately, a lot of the young women there, they weren't dressed very conservatively at all, which is not good at all. And then there's a good mix of older people, 50, 60, 70-year-olds. I interviewed a third order Dominican who was in her 80s. And she was big on Trump. She was wearing her gauze. It was interesting mix of people. I have to say, though, being there, it really struck home to me the idea that politics is just a rat race. It's all about power. It's all about posturing. It's all about positioning. And it made me think, like, gosh, who really takes this stuff that seriously? Because there was these girls we were talking to and other people who were running into and bumping into, and they were saying, "Oh, I just talked with Devin Nunes, the congressman from California," and another person was like, "Oh, would you guys like to come to a party? Donald Trump Jr. is going to be there." And I'm sitting here like, how can you get this excited over that? Like, they're not saints; they're just people, and they're politicians and probably unethical people. So it's a weird thing being there on the ground, to be honest, Brian, and seeing just kind of how the sausage is made. I mean, there's a lot of energy. Don't get me wrong. It's cool to be around that. But coalition politics, this sort of stuff, trying to get the latest interviews from all these people, it can be good. Don't get me wrong. It's important to cover it. But as Christians, I think we're called for something a bit higher. And so that's kind of what I took away from what I felt there on the ground.
So maybe picking up on that, and one of the things we've commented on is that, particularly in the latter years of the Trump term as president, and in the campaign, certainly this summer, he seemed, or at least he and his campaign manager seemed to be, reaching out to traditional Catholics pretty explicitly. I mean, we had the retweeting of Archbishop Vigano, the mentioning, I think, of Taylor Marshall, that obviously, Abby Johnson, Sister Deirdre being invited to the convention. There were certainly unprecedented kind of outreaches to would really seem, at least conservative, but maybe even traditional Catholics. Was that in evidence at this event? And again, Trump obviously didn't plan. This wasn't his event, different people, but was that there or was that absent? How would you?
No, I mean, the party itself, it's an interesting thing that's going on the political right now. They are trying to bring together the LGBT crowd, right? I mean, several years ago, there was basically anti-LGBT groups, Mass Resistance was one of them, as well as Americans for Truth Against Homosexuality, that I believe were either banned or disinvited, or there was a break somewhere a couple years ago at CPAC. And I think it happened basically under President Trump. And the party itself and the grassroots people who I was there speaking with all said, LGBT stuff, that's someone's decision, right? They can decide that. There was no real Christian strong presence at CPAC. There were Christian individuals and Christian groups. Mike Lindell, who I spoke to and did a quick interview with for LifeSite, he was talking about cancel culture, and he's obviously a big Christian. And they did feature various talks by pro-lifers, and Abby Johnson was there. But she called out the conference for its lurch to the left on social issues, on family issues, and LGBT. I mean, there was a drag queen called Lady MAGA trying to impersonate Lady Gaga there. And I spoke to him and talked about, where do you think the party's going? And this is where the future that many Republicans and people higher up in Conservatism Inc. In the movement want to bring the party. There was no real explicit mention of any Catholic things there at all. Father Frank Pavone from Priests for Life was there. He was promoting the Roe v. Wade movie and doing his outreach he does for pro-lifers. But I think it's safe to say, Brian, that this movement, conservatism as a whole, really its focus is on free markets, quote unquote, right? Limited government and abortion to an extent, but on marriage, I think they're pretty happy to move beyond it and really court that LGBT vote, if there is a vote. I don't know how many they're going to get. They keep saying we're going to expand our base and things like that. Rick Grinnell, the former, I think, ambassador to the UN, I forget his title for President Trump, he was there, and he got into a Twitter war after the conference with some people about this very issue. But I mean, there was no explicit Catholic at all. There wasn't any outreach to just others really in general. I mean, there were some booths, but I think it's safe to say the elites on the political right would be fine with moving beyond some issues that traditional Catholics hold dear. So
moving beyond just sort of, okay, we lost that battle and just accept
I mean, President Trump himself said, I mean, during a 60 Minutes interview before he was even president, that he's fine with gay marriage. Gay marriage. He even used Phil and Hodges. And so I think they're just now wanting to say, all right, we'll try to defend religious liberty for Little Sisters of the Poor, and we'll try to make sure that happens for others. But President Trump pursued policies that decriminalized homosexuality overseas and things like that, and they want to move that into the party. And that's I think that's the one thing, again, like I said earlier at the beginning of our interview, this is the problem and the issue of coalition and movement politics is there's always shifting sands, and where Christians and Catholics fit into all that, sometimes it's hard to see that, and that's kind of where the movement is right now.
They're interesting observations, and again, from someone who kind of watched the publicly televised thing, that certainly didn't come through as obviously as you're saying, that you could tell it on the ground. That's interesting.
And it's interesting, just to add one more quick thing. I mean, President Trump picked up on this in his speech. He said, men and women should not be competing against one another. And there was a panel discussion moderated by Terry Schilling from the American Principles Project that involved a college athlete, a female athlete, who spoke out and she doesn't want men competing against her, rightfully so. Right. But so that's kind of the way the movement is phrasing this issue. They've sort of given up on the gay marriage stuff, right? Quote unquote gay marriage. But now they're focusing on other things that are still politically relevant and most people disagree with. And so that's kind of how they're going along, kind of trying to cover themselves, I think, to say, look, we're still against the radical far LGBT agenda, right? Boys and girls shouldn't be playing with each other. Boys and girls should probably have separate bathrooms, but they're still going to try to court that transgender and LGBT and gay so-called conservative vote. That's, I think, where this issue is coming down on. And I mean, as Catholics, like, we can't be content with that. No, we need to recover the family unit. And it's not just, we're not just speaking for, we shouldn't just desire our religious liberty. We just shouldn't seek the desire to like Oliver Twist, right? Please, sir, give me some more.
Some more, yes.
No, we have to assert, we have the right because Christ is on our side. Christ is king of society, and it has to reflect that. And so we can't just be content with saying, oh, let's just have these crumbs from the table. No, everything belongs to Christ, family, society, all the above. So we have to fight for that, really.
No, and you're right. It's always a challenge for Catholics, particularly in a secular state, and particularly Catholics since the French Revolution, where we've lived in these really troubled polities, that kind of balance between a defensive posture, like they're out to get it, they're persecuting us, we need to kind of preserve our ability to practice the faith and not become obliterated, but to just sort of settle for that has always been a danger. Like, okay, hey, they're leaving us alone for the moment.
Right.
That's good enough, and has always been a temptation.
That's always been, that was the calculation at Vatican II, right? John Courtney Murray looks around the 1950s, America, and he says, hey, look, there's a lot of God-fearing people here. They're common sense. And so what do? The church wed itself to the modern liberal political arrangement. And what have we gotten? Well, we've gotten HHS, mandates from Obama that push the sisters into court, and the whole liberal project is basically over. It's just nothing but a mirage that until now it's collapsed fully, and we're seeing just the authoritarian left be true to its nature, as Patrick Deneen and others have said. Archbishop Lefebvre knew this, and we're finally seeing that come to fruition. And the response has to be Christ. Christ is the response. Christ or chaos, right? Yes. So all these half measures that the political right is trying to take, it's not going to happen. It's not going to do you good. So we have to, consecrate Russia's Immaculate Heart and put Christ on our side. He is our armor. That's the only way that we're going to respond. Conservatism is not enough. Christianity, Catholicism, that's the solution.
Well, and again, conservatism, if it's understood, what it's become in many ways for the past few hundred years, as conserving the last stage of the revolution, right? Wait, this and no farther. And conserving the new status quo as it gets reconstituted every time. I mean, that certainly, you end up just along the path of the revolution, and you become just a yield sign to slow down a little bit, but you're still going the same direction. Where obviously, right, if it's Christ the King, it's a complete U-turn in a different direction. But let's maybe back up a little. You mentioned the film Roe v. Wade that Father Pavone was there about. I'd read, did they actually have a premiere of that film there, or what happened with that?
Yeah, so there was actually a red carpet event held. It was Friday night. And it was produced by and directed by Nick Loeb. Nick is pro-life. You might know him. Several years ago, he was in the news. He was formerly the spouse of Sofia Vergara. She's a famous comedian in Hollywood. Yes. And there was a big issue over embryos that they had decided to freeze. But Nick is a good guy. He's pro-life. He seems to see things the right way. And the movie premiered Friday night. Got to speak with Nick. As well as some of the other actors in the film, Robert Davi, Mindy Robinson, and some others. Not all the cast was there. John Voight was in the movie. He wasn't at the premiere. Tommy Lahren, who's a famous, conservative commentator for Fox News, she was there. Who actually not long ago said it would be a mistake to overturn Roe. And so she's in the film. She made a cameo. I tried to get her. Get an interview with her on the red carpet. It felt like she was kind of dodging me. I'm not sure if someone tipped her off because she walked right around when I was interviewing Kevin Sorbo, who's an actor, a very pro-life and conservative Christian actor. And so I was kind of keeping an eye on her. And I think somebody else might have asked her that question, like, why are you in this film? What are your views on abortion? Like, do you want it overturned? And so then it was interesting to see that. And it was an interesting movie. Definitely watch it if you can. It's always good to patronize and support these sorts of movies, because they're not made that often in Hollywood. And people can quibble about the quality of some of these things. I know
Mhm.
in the past, conservative, movies in Hollywood haven't been the best and most entertaining, but check it out. It's definitely worthwhile. And glad to see, again, if anything, hey, premiering movies like this at CPAC, it's probably low hanging fruit. It's
Mhm.
easy to do. You're not going to get a lot of pro-choicers, pro-abortionists at CPAC, but it was a good thing.
So you watched the film there at the premiere?
Yeah, they
Yes.
premiered
Yeah,
it in
you
the
did.
ballroom,
Yeah.
and I think there was several thousand people there, so it was on the big screen. It was interesting, yeah.
So how would you say it compares to Unplanned, for example? As powerful, not quite the same?
It's a bit different. I mean,
Okay.
this takes on more of a sort of a documentarian feel. It's a more of a
Okay.
historical overview of what happened. It's a narrative, actually. So Nick Loeb is playing Bernard Nathanson. He's a famous abortionist who later
Yes.
becomes a Catholic, and so it's a different feel than that. I haven't spoken with Abby Johnson just yet about it. I know she's come on Catholic Family News
Hmm.
before. My sense is that she probably enjoyed it
Hmm.
and appreciated it. But yeah, overall, it premieres actually comes out in April, so we got a little bit time yet before it actually comes out. I think it's coming out like on Amazon Prime, different platforms. I'm not sure if there's
Yes.
a full movie premiere, but yeah, Google it. Go on LifeSite News right now. You can see my interviews with all the actors in the movie, and it's interesting to be up close and personal with some of those people. They've lived interesting lives, and it was a good time to be there.
Good, good. Um, so we've touched on that, the sort of troubling side of some of what you observed, and then again, this bright spot here, this film getting some attention. Um, any other of the aspects of it that you think would be important for our viewers to know, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think look, Conservatism Inc. needs Jesus Christ. I mean,
Mhm.
it's simple as that. I mean, there is a movement here that really is, you talk about conservatism. Well, what is conservatism? Is it the Russell Kirk sort where there's a belief in a higher power, where we view man as fallen, where there's a natural hierarchy, and that government needs to sort of uphold and promote virtue, or is conservatism libertarianism?
Mhm.
Right? And I think the movement needs to figure that out. And I think, unfortunately, young people on social issues like LGBT and family life, they're increasingly libertarian. And I think what it strikes me is, I watch. I've been to several of these sort of events, where there's big rallies and things like that, conservative events like this. And people like Charlie Kirk, he was there. Charlie Kirk's very, well known
Mhm.
for various things. He's at Turning Points USA, and Ben Shapiro and things like that. But what what are they conserving? Like we said earlier, what are they
Mhm.
fighting for? Is it just big business, free market, so-called economics? I mean, that's perhaps one element of, we can debate the merits of that, right? Catholic social teaching condemns laissez-faire economics, right? And so when I go to these things, it's like, do these young people who go and chase after literally Charlie Kirk and Ben Shapiro, um, and want their autographs and photographs with them, and others like Matt Gaetz was there, you know, do they understand there's an alternative here? Because
Mm.
what we're operating in is left and the right. It's really a sort of matrix. And Young Americans for Freedom, Turning Point USA, they do really well at getting to these young people on college campuses, and I dare say call it indoctrination, and get them recruited into this bubble of political
Mm.
thought. When in fact, we need to be teaching young people, Catholics especially, we got to be better at this and go to college campuses and say, hey, look, here's Catholic social teaching. We're supposed to operate outside all of this and not be so enamored with it and put it in its proper place. So, when I'm there in the midst of all this, I just want to stand up and be like, stop treating these people in this way. I mean, there was a golden statue of Trump at CPAC, and Abby Johnson rightfully called it out during the panel discussion I watched that. It was awesome. And we do need to be a thorn in the side of the whole political movement and everything, not just conservatism, the conservative movement, but all of the above. I mean, because look, at the end of the day, we're here, what, 40, 50, maybe 60 some years I don't know how close you are to that, Brian, but you know, it comes very quick, doesn't it?
Yes.
So like, what are we wedding ourselves to? For what? For like one law here or there? I don't know. Maybe I'm just so repulsed by coalition politics sort of after seeing this. I could be an odd duck, but it sort of just makes you think, man, I long for the days of Christendom. I long for the days of Catholic action when bishops stood on their 2 feet, led the faithful on these things. And you know, we did what was right and didn't put politics ahead of Jesus Christ, which I think is what's happening.
You mentioned a really good point there about the bishops, because I read an article earlier this week, although I think it's been out a little while, by Dr. Janet Smith, who has been, you know, a long written in the pro-life area, I guess, for many decades. But it was a really interesting article because she was taking issue with, as we've talked about here, the Vatican just sort of, oh, don't worry, the vaccine's fine, everybody go take your vaccine, you know, and the Pope even maybe mandating all employees in the Vatican get it, and some interesting contradictions there. But what she pointed out was, you know, the bishops, the mainstream bishops are saying, here's the moral analysis, and you know, it's okay, you can do it. But they always add in, which is part of the moral analysis, but you have to strongly, you know, object to this, even if we're sort of forced to use it. And she points out, I think very perceptively, that's the whole problem with what they're doing, because they sort of pay lip service to that, but they're not doing anything. They're basically, so what they're saying is like, hey, go make the pharmaceuticals rich, go get your vaccine and don't worry about it, because if you object, but they're not objecting, right? It's not like they're standing up to Pfizer and Moderna and saying, okay, look, maybe we'll tell people they can take it for 9 months, but after that, you better have an alternative that is not morally suspect and not made from abortion, or we're going to tell every Catholic in the world to stop, right? That, or, you know, something like that, some strong stand. But the bishops are essentially, after paying lip service, we should tell them, using abortion's a bad thing, just do nothing about it.
Yeah, and even unfortunately, there's certain traditionalists who aren't standing up on this issue. I mean, we know what COVID has been used for and what's being implemented, and here's the bottom line is, so goes the church, so goes the world. Yes. So, you know, I'm sitting here complaining about CPAC and all these things, and it's true, I think, what I saw, but the solution is what's going on in the church. Yes. Where are the bishops? Where's the Pope? You know, plural, yes. Maybe, and what's going on? And that's the real solution. The enemy, you could argue, the real guys that we need to focus on is the lukewarm Catholics in the church who aren't speaking up, and especially the clergy, because laity can't offer the sacraments, right? We can't absolve sins. It's the hierarchy that God put there and gave them the authority to uphold truth. We can uphold truth as much as we can, Brian, but we're laity, right? Yep. We can't direct the faithful as much as whoever's watching the show, right? Whoever likes our writings, but it's the bishops, the priests, the clergy, the cardinals who are supposed to do that. Yes. And when they fail, everything else goes down with it. So, you know, we're living in the ruins of a church that's totally demolished. So none of this, it should be surprising.
Yes, very true. Well, maybe before we wrap up, we return to something you talked about in the beginning. You mentioned Governor Ron DeSantis, who is the governor of Florida. So he hosted this event. And here, I'll just show a quick, I think I have a little clip here. Yeah, he is, I think, coming to give his speech. So again, it's like to maybe ask your impressions about him. He's somebody, I'll admit, I've been watching for some time now, and he certainly does seem to be popular within this coalition, as you said. From that, I think that results, if Trump doesn't run, I think what I saw is he's like by far got the most votes or opinions of that they would want to support him. But he, unlike Trump, is certainly a Catholic, and he. Again, I was impressed when he did issue, for the short period in Florida, a lockdown or a cessation of business. He immediately exempted religious organizations, from that, which was fairly positive. So some positive signs there that he I don't know, what's your, maybe having seen him, what's your impression? Do you think he's like Trump, but a little more Catholic, or, and I'll admit the other side of it, that's the positive. He strikes me as definitely a little more establishment, right? Where Trump, one of the things that is encouraging, and maybe it's a ploy, maybe it's his persona, but not being establishment says, well, maybe he can actually cut through things and see things. Where DeSantis certainly does, as you said, comes across more polished, but does also come across as more establishment. So I don't know if you have any reactions to interacting with him or seeing him there, or your thoughts on Governor DeSantis.
Oh yeah, I mean the straw poll did say about 22% of the people at CPAC said Ron DeSantis would be my preferred candidate. Now there might be some bias in that because it is in Florida, and most people there already have some familiarity with him. He does strike me as someone who's a bit more part of the mainstream political community. I mean, he's a governor. I forget what he was before that, but I think maybe a state lawmaker. I'm not exactly sure, but yeah, he has that experience and he has that knowledge and acumen, which I think is important for someone who's going to be a president. I mean, if we're being honest with President Trump's time in office, there's a lot of things he did by executive order, which are now being reversed by Joe Biden. The legislative accomplishments of President Trump, they could have been better. Okay, if he was a natural lawmaker and politician. Okay. DeSantis, I think, has that appeal, and he's really the only one stepping forward right now. Governor Abbott in Texas is doing similar things to Florida. He wants the state open. He's issuing orders to allow, no masks, let's open up for business, things like that. And I think people want that in their leaders. They want someone who understands, hey, this is a totalitarian effort to shut down and literally destroy businesses and control people. And when you see someone standing up, I mean, what strikes me is that's a masculine thing. I mean, DeSantis strikes me as an aggressive guy who has leadership qualities. And from everyone I'm talking to in my traditional Catholic friend circles, they say it's an issue of authority. And it's an issue of masculinity. We don't want weak leaders who bow to political correct mobs, right? And do all these things. So yeah, he is being there, seeing him. I think he has a ton of upside. He, I think, realizes that too. He's still only in his 40s. I mean, he knows how to play the game. So I think he's waiting to see what President Trump is going to do. Is Trump going to launch a media empire? Is he going to keep control of the party? Is he going to keep interjecting on various news channels because he's off Twitter and Facebook now, right? So I think DeSantis is going to play it very careful. He's going to see how the midterms shake out. Trump, who said at CPAC that he's going to get more involved in 2022 in the midterms and see if he can get those rhinos and others who voted against him when it came to impeachment out of office. And I think after that, it's going to be up in the air. I do think it is Trump's party. He reasserted that at CPAC. But, I mean, DeSantis is chomping at the bit right there. I don't know who else is stepping forward for the Republicans. There's a lot of people who want to get him. Nikki Haley, obviously, she's the establishment deep state pick. I don't know if Mike Pence is going to get in or not. A lot of people from the Trump coalition don't like him right now, and he probably will have to wait another 4 or 6 years, 2028 it would be, to maybe jump back in. But, the party, Matt Gaetz was there all weekend. Gaetz is a Florida guy, and his message has been, let's get Liz Cheney and all the other rhinos out. Marjorie Taylor Greene was there. I posted a video of her on Twitter, and she's of the nationalist, patriotic, populist side. And so there's
and she, from what I've seen, does seem much stronger than you were talking about on the LGBT issue.
Yes, she is definitely one of those voices, and I think she's great. We need more people like her. I don't know if she's Catholic, but she's on that wavelength with us. And so so DeSantis and that crowd, if they can keep growing, that's better than the alternative, right? Than the Cheneys, the Haleys, and the others. So we'll see what happens.
Yes, no, that's very true, very true. Well, I think that's been really good. I think it's a helpful overview of what went on there. And as I said, much of your insight can really only be, I think, gained by being there, talking to people. So I appreciate that, and appreciate your warnings to us, because again, I think the popes have warned us. The popes warned the great feats of Catholic action. I'm thinking of, for example, Marc Saunier in France in the early 20th century. There's a group in France that started trying to advance Catholic social principles in France, and the Sion movement, and they kind of lost the focus of Christ being the focus of it, and they ended up being condemned by St. Pius X for saying, look, you're going to do more harm than good. So the popes have warned us that it is a danger, and it's a real danger when we feel afraid, right? When we're threatened by totalitarianism, right? Because my enemy's enemy is my friend at the moment, and that's understandable, but we can't lose sight of where we're ultimately going. And I think that that's, an important lesson for us to keep remembering. As well as one last thing to follow up on that you did say that about DeSantis. One of the best sermons I've heard in the past year was basically a sermon that said the problem of the modern church and world is a crisis of fatherhood. And essentially said every problem we face is because there is a crisis of fatherhood. And it was really a very powerful sermon. And I think you're right. I think people who can't articulate that from a Catholic perspective sense that. And so they are attracted, I think you saw, to people that exhibit at least the accidents, at least of fatherhood, if not the substance. So I think there's some keen observations. Well, thank you for spending time with us again today and reporting, and we're happy to have you back another time in the future.
Absolutely. Thanks again for having me, and enjoy the sun down there in Florida. It's amazing weather. I'm stuck up here in Michigan where it's 35, 40 degrees. So you got it made down there.
Yes, it's been beautiful down here. It's wonderful. So great. God bless.
Thanks, Brian.